Hi, my name's Melanie Franklin and I'm a Director of Agile Change Management. This video is all about the results of a showcase event that I did recently. The APMG Showcase in central London is run once a year and it brings together lots of project and programme and change managers. And I ran a facilitated discussion group several times throughout the day where we were addressing this question about how do you build your credibility for leading change? Because one of the things that interests me as an experienced leader of change and a transformation consultant is the fact that there's this intangible thing called credibility, gravitas, authority perhaps, that has an effect on whether or not people are going to listen to you and follow you throughout the change initiative that you're a part of. And if we don't get it right, then we make life so much harder. So the first question that we addressed in our group is really, what is credibility? It did make me laugh in preparing for this session because I realised it was the first time I'd ever really looked up the definition of the word credibility, or certainly consciously. But across all of the dictionaries there was a commonality in terms of the definition is the quality of being trusted and believed in. So credibility is a quality of some kind. What we looked at here in this very colourful writing was all the synonyms, the things that it is also known as or recognised as. The first thing, there were a few sort of ideas about actually it's about being authentic and having integrity. There's a quality here about being dependable and consistent. So there is something about people being able to rely on somebody. They have credibility, they are reliable and dependable and consistent. We also looked at, we got more into this idea of sort of characteristics and personal sort of credibility. We looked at the fact that people who have a positive attitude, because we know that in leading change we have to do a lot of persuading. And if it doesn't look like you're persuaded about the benefits of the change, then it's very hard to persuade others. So a positive mental attitude. We also thought that there was something in the fact that you have to like people, you have to enjoy engaging with people. Because one of the things we're going to be doing and using your credibility for is building relationships. So you have to start with the principle that you quite like people. There are some qualities in here about being truthful and honest, being empathetic, but also there was something about being impressive and confident, so people felt able to follow you. So you're not afraid of your subject, you have some specialist knowledge about your subject perhaps. And that got us on to a little bit more about knowledge and expertise. And there was a feeling that in part credibility is very much about track record of success perhaps, experienced in leading similar changes, being qualified and having credentials of some kind, so that people understand that you do know a lot and therefore you are worth following. So that knowledgeable, and that knowledgeable also might come from experience. So we had a good look around what credibility meant to us. And what I was really pleased about in some of the groups is that we developed a model. We got talking about how do we as change professionals hire other change professionals and what are we looking for in interviews. And I really enjoyed learning from my groups. They came up with this sort of model where we said, well, the first thing that we do when we're interviewing and when we're seeing if somebody has credibility is that we look at those personal qualities. So we do look at whether or not they seem to enjoy building relationships. Do they come across as positive and interested and motivated? So we certainly looked at the positive personal qualities, and we felt that there was a sort of barrier here, that as a filter almost. If you don't come across as having those, then possibly you're not going to want to investigate any further whether or not they have the necessary subject matter expertise. What was interesting about the subject matter expertise is we thought that actually it came down to a few things, that this subject matter expertise wasn't necessarily sort of nebulous, but it was actually quite specific, that there was technical expertise of some kind, but But also that might be that if you're implementing change in a finance area or a marketing area, that you know about finance or marketing. So there was real subject matter expertise, the technicalities of it. We also felt that it was really important that you had change management expertise. That this just didn't happen by accident, that you were actually schooled in the different types of models and techniques for actually managing and leading change. So that was an area of expertise that we thought we would investigate through an interview. But the other thing that we were looking for, which also connects with the last thing of context, is that perhaps what you have is that cultural expertise. You are very well versed in understanding different cultures and how people work together. So there was something in there about having an understanding of how people operate, again, if you're going to persuade people. So that was the next sort of hurdle point, is does the person have enough technical and change management and cultural understanding? And if they didn't, then again, we wouldn't be looking at it. But we also thought, off the back of our conversation about what is credibility, that there was a third thing, which was about context. That the audience felt very strongly when we were discussing this, that having subject matter expertise in isolation from the environment in which you were going to implement the change wasn't enough. So could you see the wider picture? Did you understand the type of organisation you'd be working within and what their needs were? And it wasn't good enough just to have led a change, a similar type of change in another organisation, because if that organisation had a completely different operating approach, you'd probably struggle. So these three elements here I thought were really useful, and I'm certainly going to be using this model. The other thing that came out of our discussion was the fact that actually in the personal qualities, one of the things we were sort of summarising was that all of those personal qualities, being positive, being motivated, enthusiastic, liking people, a lot of that was about empathy and being able to create empathy with the people you are impacting with your change. But we also thought that that empathy extended into the idea of context, that you were empathetic about the type of environment into which you would be implementing change. So it was the people side and the environmental side where you had to build empathy. That led us into a conversation really about the importance of emotional intelligence. And we felt therefore that credibility and being able to put across and establish your credibility required you to have high levels of interpersonal skills. So you didn't look like you were showing off and you didn't actually put the barriers up with people because of that. So how you establish your credibility, how you put it across to people was important. Then we moved on to having a look at why credibility was important. And this is a fairly typical change curve. Up until this point, people are moving along on how they do things at the moment. This is the moment at which we implement change. So this is, if you like, the foreign element we're introducing. And ultimately over here, this is when we get, hopefully, to the benefits. And this led us to recognition that whilst people may go through an emotional journey, if we have sufficient credibility, we can help those that are impacted by change, and therefore there is a business case for building your credibility. Because what happens is that you are going to help people through this point, and perhaps their journey will be a lot shallower and a lot shorter, and you may even raise up the level of benefits that they have. So immediately, for an organisation that you work for, your credibility brings in earlier benefits. So there is a faster return on investment. The second thing is that your credibility and people's willingness to follow you means that actually the productivity dip is there and not there. So less productivity dip and therefore less harm in your organisation. Less chaos and confusion with customers, less unfulfilled orders, all of those things that we know go along with the productivity dip. So we felt very strongly that there was quite a strong business case, a financial business case. This can be costed And therefore, if you are employing somebody who is perhaps more at the top of their game, perhaps it's worth it, because actually they can bring in the benefits earlier. So that got us into a very interesting conversation. Lastly, otherwise this video will go on forever, is we had a look at what do we do in terms of building credibility. We've identified what it is. We've had a look at personal qualities, subject matter expertise and context. We've said how important it is, and there's a real business case behind doing it. What we were interested in is perhaps how do we build it? How do we establish our credibility? How do we show people that we are a credible force in this change? And some of the things that came up, there was a feeling that there had to be honesty. Honesty about what you are capable of. That was very important if you are credible, that you are actually, you've got that sound track record and you're being honest about what it is you're putting across. So there was a truthfulness there, a transparency, a consistency in how you behaved. We also said that there was this idea of positivity in the terms of the attitude was really important, because we already know that most people are predisposed to look for the negatives before they look for the positives. What we need to do is overcome that, because otherwise we become part of the resistance to change. We're not solving that problem. So positivity is really important. The other thing is that in terms of the attitude, there was this idea of approachability. And that was about being, there was an awful lot about friendliness and liking people came across. So there were some personal qualities in there, the attitude that you have. The behaviours were quite interesting. One of the key things is do what you say you will do. It's about consistency again. It's about stability and reliability, and people rapidly understanding that actually I can trust this person. So an underlying theme about building credibility is around trust, I think. And actually the behaviour here, do what you say you will do, builds that trust. And we looked at how we could do that quite quickly by following through on things that we're requested to do very quickly and showing people we mean it. Another thing about the behaviours was all about this idea of always being willing to challenge the status quo. So not being afraid to say, well, just because it's always been done that way. That showed perhaps another quality that, again, the trust comes in here. Another big quality that we felt was important was this idea of confidence. You're confident enough to challenge the status quo and to ask people to explain why they think something should be as it is. That implies that you know your subject and that you are willing to debate the subject. So we thought that those were quite important behaviours. With knowledge and experience, we had an awful lot of conversations about whether or not you could build that quickly and how could you do this, because not everybody's had a lot of experience of organisational change. But a number of the groups, we discussed the fact that even somebody in their 20s perhaps has had the experience of how it felt to change. They've moved from junior school to senior school. They've gone from being the most senior person in the organisation in terms of, you know, they were a pupil that they knew all their teachers, they knew the subject, they knew the buildings, to going to being the new fish in the new pond and actually not knowing anybody. So even if people don't have a lot of experience about a particular type of change, there is some experience in there that can be drawn out. But the most important thing we thought about knowledge and experience was it was all about sharing lessons learned. So again, there is this feeling of honesty that came through, and that being willing to admit what went well and didn't go well in past experiences, how you felt sometimes about what was happening in terms of a change, was really important. In terms of qualifications, one of the things that we talked about was how quickly qualifications and accreditations and recognition can actually help you build your confidence. So there was a very big link here between qualifications. We never said that qualifications could ever replace knowledge and experience. But what we did recognise that they could actually be a quick win for establishing credibility. And that one of the reasons that qualifications are so important is because it enables you to go, when you're under pressure and there's a lot of resistance, no, I do know what I'm talking about. So, of course, being at the APMG Showcase, we talked about the APMG qualification called the Change Management Foundation and Practitioner qualification, which I absolutely love, because I think that the syllabus of this qualification probably equates to a couple of semesters from a master's programme in managing change. It goes through so many different theories and models, and therefore what you're really building up there is a huge bank of knowledge about theories and models and techniques for change, so that when you come up against any kind of change situation, you have a huge amount to draw on. Not everything's going to be relevant for every change, but you have an awful lot of tools from which you can pick. But the other thing is, because you know so much, it does help build your personal confidence, and that personal confidence helps you appear approachable and friendly, enables you to challenge the status quo, and links back into an awful lot else of what we've said about credibility.